Okay. So I will call to order this meeting of the Grand County Audit Committee. This is September 23rd. Present are Commissioners Bill Winfield, Tricia Dean, and myself, Kevin Walker. We also have County Attorney Stephen Stocks, Acting County Administrator Quinn Hall, and Alicia Oliver. I did not get enough sleep last night. So that will be the first of many mistakes. I'm going to rearrange the agenda a little bit because I see online we have Karen Curtin, who is our newly engaged financial advisor. And so, hi, Karen. It's Bill, Trish, and me, Kevin. And,
oh, it's nice to meet you all.
Okay. So, and do we see Cody on Zoom yet? Okay, let's push this thing back. So I guess we'll just start. Let's get the minutes out of the way. We have a copy of the June 12th minutes. I'll make a motion.
You don't have this in line 19.
Yeah, the only.
Oh, I thought I said line 19. Oh, no. You didn't know was that I could say. Oh, okay. 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 So that's okay. So we'll get just June 12th. Okay.
We need a second.
Okay, I'll second that. That's okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So approved unanimously. Okay, the next agenda item is, I guess we've already done superficial introductions, but I don't know, Karen, if I know you and I spoke on the phone, you told me about your background, but maybe just for the public and the other commissioners, it might be good to repeat that. And you are muted right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear my machine froze. Are y'all ready?
I was just inviting you to tell us something about your background.
Oh, excellent. All right, thank you. Well, as I'm speaking to you now, I'm sitting in Dallas. I have 17 years of public sector experience. I started out in the audit space. I was auditing governments and not-for-profits at a public accounting firm called BKD, which was the predecessor firm for where I am now. My largest client was the city of Phoenix, Arizona, just to give you an idea of scope and scale. At the time, that was the sixth largest city in the country. And then in 2018, I had the opportunity to go to the other side of the table, if you will. Instead of being an auditor, I became the auditee. And I was at the town of Highland Park, which is a municipality that is south of Dallas. Started out as controller and finished up as the director of finance. Like in many municipalities, I wore several hats. As that under that role, I was responsible for all of finance, which included reviewing all of our payables, our payroll. I was the investment officer, prepared the monthly financial and investment reports, also the operating budget, as well as did all of the entries to prepare for year end for our ACFR and interfaced with our auditors, our external auditors, and reviewed our annual ACFR. And then was also headed up the municipal court, was responsible for that, as well as utility customer service, which was our water and sewer and alarm monitoring billing there. So I was there at Highland Park for 6 years, and then this year came back to Forvis, Mazars, was invited back to start our government outsourced accounting services line. And the firm basically recognized the need that there is a shortage of financial personnel at the municipal level, the county level, and there's just a lot of folks that need some assistance. And let's see, put that on hold. Excuse me. And so we are helping municipalities across the country, literally, with financial statement close and different consulting projects. So I responded to the RFP that you all submitted earlier this year and appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
Okay, thanks, Karen. It's like an impressive resume.
Thank you.
Are we expecting Gabe? So maybe we can switch the internal audit stuff up in the agenda and someone could go check with Gabe to see if he's gonna. Oh, he was going to talk to Gabe. Okay. Cody, are you ready to talk about the internal audit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Update us, please.
So I met with Quinn and Gabe, and we've talked about gathering information related to the funds that we wanted to review this year. The restricted funds is the focus that we had talked about earlier in the spring. So we're going to focus on the TRT revenue, TRCC revenues, as well as the airport revenues. And Gabe and Quinn are still gathering that information. We'll send it over to me. The focus of my review is to compare that information, how funds have been spent with what the statutory requirements are at the federal, state, and local level, and also review the audit that was performed by the state auditor's office, and look at any of those findings, and then bring that back to this body to discuss any of those findings from the state audit, as well as the things that I've found, and then provide recommendations. So that's the update I have for this meeting.
Okay, thanks.
I've got a question if I can.
Go ahead.
How far back are you going on the airport? I know that there was some concern brought forward by the director of the airport a while back, and so we're not just talking your internal audit is going to cover last year. I'm hoping that there's some direction to go a little bit further back. Where is that, Cody?
Thanks, Bill. That's a good clarification. So we're going to look back to the time when the CARES and the ARPA money came in. 2020, as far back as those first receipts of those funds, I think that's the area where the director was most concerned that there may have been some discrepancies there. So I'll go back as far as those first receipts of CARES and ARPA monies.
And then will you be working with her? I know you said Cody and Quinn, but I would hope she's involved in this a little bit so that her input could be added to that.
Yeah, I think to the extent that we need to have direction from her, yes, most definitely reach out and have a discussion with her.
Thank you.
Jody
I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
just going to ask, has all the ARPA money been spent, or is it in the requisition phase? Or maybe you don't know yet.
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Spent, but yeah, this specific focus was on what was spent at the airport, and what really the main focus is where funds that maybe should have been not so much the ARPA and CARES Act money, but the replacement revenue, really the revenues that should have stayed with the airport, but somehow ended up in the general fund because the ARPA and CARES Act paid for such a majority of the operations of the airport. So we're just making sure that fund balance is in the right place.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
But the broader discussion about ARPAs and CARES Acts, I don't know that answer.
Okay. Okay. It's a preliminary question, just curious at this point. So much money went out in CARES and ARPA. At the town that I was at, we received a couple $1 million just out of nowhere. It just came. And so you're probably in a similar position.
I think, and correct me, may I? with the committee, I believe that what we discussed looking into then is that any of the CARES Act or ARPA money that was used to fund the ongoing maintenance operations at the airport, we want to make sure that the revenue that was received at the airport during that time goes back to the airport and stays with that. So I do believe ARPA and CARES are almost completely expended at this point, if not 100%. They're close. And so we just want to make sure that the revenue that was received into the airport stays with the airport as an entity. Thanks.
I think that's what Tammy's concern was also.
I guess I had another comment on the scope of work. In addition to the airport, you mentioned the TRT and TRCCA, but, and those are things that we're all pretty familiar with and have been scrutinized quite a bit. I think when I initially proposed this project, I was also just wondering if, are there other earmarked funds that aren't really on our radar screens that, we need to be careful about making the rules. So just, even if one doesn't, look at each individual expense, just saying, okay, here are the restricted funds we have, and here are the places in statute that give the rules. I was hoping that might be doable this year, so at least we'd have a catalog of what else is out there that we need to be paying attention to.
Sure.
And then we can, once we have that list, then we could prioritize which ones we think we need to look at more closely.
Yeah. Definitely. I can work with Quinn and Gabe to generate a full list of all restricted funds and then present them to this board for prioritization.
Okay. Yeah.
Happy to do that.
A link to the rules or whatever.
Sure.
And so Cody, are there any other departments? Remind me, but I know I raised the question that I would have liked to have seen active trails and transportation part of an internal audit at some point, considering all of the different areas that folks are working in that department. Did that not get added to this list, or are these the only two items that you're considering working on this year?
Yeah, so it's really a matter of capacity within the contract, and so active trails and parks is still on the list, and perhaps it could be looked at next year, unless you prioritize it as a group of restricted funds. That my takeaway from the last meeting was that restricted funds seem to be a higher priority, but I work for you, so to the extent that you want to shift that around, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that matches my memory that you proposed just for kind of restricted funds.
Is the active trails, is that the Parks, Trails and Recreation Fund that's in the ACFR? It's a
No,
special revenue fund.
That's a department within the county that receives funding from a variety of sources.
Maybe it wraps up into the general fund.
And I think its actual title is, what is it? It's GCAT, so Grand County Active Trails and Transportation. And my interest was, considering that it's the fourth largest payroll budget that we have in the county, but if we get to it next year, that's better than not at all.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about where the internal? And Cody, what do you expect to happen by the end of the year, or what's? Could you tell us something about timing?
Sure. I think what I will do is get the full list of restricted funds just as quickly as I can, and probably email that out to the group so you can prioritize that sooner than later. And then the airport information I have that information all put together. Just need to review that. Gabe has sent that over to me, so that could be presented to you at the next meeting, which should, if it was in a month, I could present that to you in an October meeting. And the restricted funds list I can get to you, before that meeting, in case you wanted to review that airport information and then prioritize that list at that meeting. And then we could try to have all the information wrapped up in November or December.
Okay, thanks.
Then I've got one last question. I see that this agreement expires December 1st, 2021, and then it's allowed to be annually updated through 2025. So is there a discussion in mind at some point when that happens, that yearly extension or what are we looking at here?
I think, and correct me if you're looking at it, I think we've been renewing that early in the year, but that's up to you guys if you want to renew it earlier or.
I was just unsure when that date was that it gets renewed.
I'm just going off memory, it's usually in the spring, early in the year, pre-spring.
This is the internal audit
This is the
contract.
internal audit contract we're talking about, right?
Do you know, Cody?
I'm just looking at the contract right now. I mean, traditionally, this doesn't mean it's what the contract says. It's at the beginning of the year or the end of the previous year. We just have a discussion. Usually when Mary was the chair, she would send me an email saying, please continue for the following year.
Okay. And how many years has it been so far since you started?
I believe I started in 2020 and there was a new contract in 2021. So that's 4 years. This would be the 5th year.
So we're in the 5th year right now.
I believe so.
That's what my understanding also. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay, so that means we're done with the agenda item 6. Okay, so Stephen, did you try to find Gabe? Or no, you didn't?
I inquired as to, well,
I'm not sure Gabe received like a formal invitation and I don't think he had it on his calendar.
Okay. I guess he was part of the email chain and he's shown up at every other meeting, so I just thought.
I did informed him of the meeting, but I don't think he planned on attending it.
Okay,
I just think our number 7 item especially is pretty important that we have some of his feedback on, I would think.
I can ask him if he'd be willing to attend. He's in
Yeah.
his office.
I mean, okay, so maybe we should just recess for 5 minutes. Do we have something else we can talk about?
The external, the engagement letter for Larson, is that dependent on Gabe also? Number 4 on your agenda.
Yeah, please.
Do you guys want to recess and ask him or?
Yeah, let's see.
Let's do.
Okay, yeah, so let's recess for 5 minutes, just to explanation to Karen and other people listening. Typically at these audit meetings, Gabe is here at least for the beginning because, so much of the audit concerns have to do with the county auditor. But looks like there was some miscommunication for this one. So we will recess for 5 minutes, see if we can get Gabe to show up, and if he does, we'll proceed with the agenda. If it doesn't, we'll see what we can salvage out of the rest of the agenda. Sound good?
Okay, super. Thank you.
5 minutes.
I'm gonna mute us for 5 minutes.
Oh.
Going on right now, a lot of balls in the air.
So are we,
We're not live yet.
not live yet? Okay, so get,
I just unmuted this.
okay, we're unmuted. Okay, so I'm gonna say we're back from recess. And I guess I'm gonna skip to agenda. I know Gabe has limited time because there's a lot going on right now. So I wanted to start with agenda item number 7. That one started out as it's just, we continually have these problems that our financial statements are late because our component units are late to report. And I was looking for, constructive ways to improve that in the future. And then since I got on the agenda, we have this tax hold letter, and I thought it'd be good just to get some background. I think Grand County's been through this before. But so just maybe Gabe, you could just run us through, and Clint also, that. And one of the things I'm hoping to talk about is making sure the next year the component entities actually get the stuff on time. So.
Yeah, I think that I could speak to this as well, because this is something that we've struggled with for the last, it predates my time as the clerk auditor, predates Chris's time as the clerk auditor. This has been an ongoing problem for several years, and that a lot of our component units have to have their audits done in order for our external auditors, Larson in this case, to wrap up the financials to be submitted to the state. And the deadlines imposed on those component units is the same as the deadline imposed on us. So that they don't have to have their audit done until we do, but we have to have their audit done in order to complete ours. So the date becomes an issue. And I talked to John Hatterley, one of the partners at Larson at UAC, and he said they've been kind of trying or attempting to put some pressure on the state and the state auditor's office to bump up the date for the component units to have their audits done, because we're not the only county that faces this problem. It's actually quite a few that wait on their component units to get the full financials completed. And this is something that actually happened to me as well when in 2021, I believe, where we waited so long for the component units. And, it ends up being a few of these smaller districts that, like Thompson for one, and Recreation and Transportation, that have these smaller financial reports that need to be completed, that need to tie into ours. So we've always struggled with this to get theirs done so they can tie into ours. I'm not sure how to fix it. It's a challenge.
Could theoretically, we encourage them to adjust their bylaws. Maybe change their financial cycle slightly.
Sure.
Yeah, I think encourages. Well, I was suggesting is to say, their future funding is contingent on getting their financials done, 2 months before, our deadline or something.
I mean, what deadline would work for you?
My impression is it's not an issue with the district, and I don't at this point, I don't know penalizing districts. I see it, my understanding at least, is that the CPA firm associated with the audits of those districts are the ones that are holding things up. But, that gets into regional CPA firm drama that I don't know that much about.
Okay, so
I would agree with that. It's not the district's fault. The districts
really?
are trying to get their audits done.
Right.
Just the final product is being delivered to them at the final hour.
So who picks their auditor? Each individual district can look for their own auditor.
Yes.
So you're dealing with possibly multiple auditors here. It seems to me that that would be where we want to go if we're trying to put any pressure on somebody, would be the auditors rather than the districts. I mean, if there's a hard, solid line for them in the sand, then it's going to motivate them to get the district in line if they aren't.
No, I agree. I don't have any genius solutions to how to go about it. I mean, I've thought of a few things, but they're all pretty pie in the sky. I don't have any.
Right.
I guess another idea which is discussed, I thought maybe with you is, maybe we should just, the county could engage an auditing firm to handle multiple, because I know for a while I was liaison to the Transportation Special Service District, and they are really, their board is just barely hanging in there. And it seemed like because they were such a small district, they're taking these really big charges. They're not in a position to bargain either for cost effectiveness or for getting things done on time. And so if that were some kind of, but
No, and I would agree with that. I think that's certainly an option. I would actually ask Karen too. Is it Karen? Am I right?
yes, Karen.
As long as the firm that we're engaging, if that was the route we decided to go, big if. As long as the firm can maintain independence, does that create any further problems for the county? I would want to make sure that they are acting in true independence from the county, even if we're, so Karen, if we were to pay for some other audits, then does that create an independence concern for us?
So off the top of my head, no. So there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, I believe, component units. Do they each have their own auditor? And do you think that the reason the audit is slow is because the entity is not prepared for the audit? Because, looking at the Grand County Transportation, for example, or the Special Service Water District, it's almost like all they have is cash. It should be so quick to audit that. Do we really know what the holdup is?
I'm going to say that no, I'm not sure what the holdup is, and I'm not going to disagree with you either. I do think I'll agree with Gabe in a very non-confrontational way that I think that some of the smaller firms retained to audit these entities are up against some time and personnel constraints. Is that
Mhm.
kind enough? I hope it was.
Well,
Mhm.
I can be a little, I've heard rumors, so this isn't authoritative, but what really happens is these smaller firms, the April 15th and sort of personal income taxes come to it. So there's a couple of months where they're just not doing work except for that kind of thing. So, but
Uh-huh.
again, but I do think the problem is, it's smaller firms and they don't have any reason to prioritize these special service districts.
And have you inquired of your existing auditor as to whether or not they could also audit the component units?
So what I was just going to add was that our current auditor, Larson and Company, does audit some of our component units, but not all.
And are those timely, the ones that they audit?
Yes. They have every incentive to make sure.
So
Okay.
maybe they could do the others.
Okay, so it sounds like one thing to look into is whether we can just convince, I guess maybe it's 3 of our component units to switch accounting firms and make it easy for them. We'll do all the work. They just have to say, yeah, okay.
Or
Okay.
it might be some legal here. Is there some statute, Stephen, that we need to look into that requires them to pick their own auditor? Or do we give them a list of a couple of people to pick from? There's got to be some incentive that we can give them to get done on time here.
I haven't delved into this question. I don't know. Shoot from the hip. I don't know. I think they have some autonomy, but to what length? I think that the county can always offer to provide additional services, but there is the element of them controlling themselves to some extent. But I can look at the specific question whether we can offer them to have an auditor.
At least in Texas, I audited cities that had component units. Our firm did both. They signed their own engagement letter, the component unit did. But you could have at least in Texas, the same auditor for both. And then it was done timely and it wrapped up. And, they may be willing because I'm sure they're not happy to be late and they probably don't like multiple calls saying, why isn't it ready? So, maybe it would be welcome news for them to be able to get the audit done timely and move on.
Which 3 don't use Larson? Just out of curiosity.
Well, that's our transportation special service. Sure.
I do think that if we decided to go this route, and offer to take on that financial burden for those special service districts, that would be a big incentive for them to at least consider the proposal.
But maybe this is implied, but I was thinking we could also give them, in addition to a carrot of incentive, we could a stick disincentive. That, I guess some of these districts, we don't have to fund at all. We can figure out another way to get money to something like that, and just tell them, you know, if you want us to send you money next year, which we don't have to do, then we want you to figure out how to make sure these numbers get in quickly, and you know, we don't think your current firm is capable of that. So it's, I don't know. It seems this has been such an ongoing problem, and I think the sort of gentle reminders that we've given in the past haven't been enough. Maybe we should.
And I think identifying those districts, and seeing what their remaining contractual obligations are. In such a way that the RFP that we're going to be putting out for an external auditor, might also include, an agreement to audit a list of components.
Yeah.
All listed.
Well, it could also have a line item, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but a line item for each one of the component units so that we know what we're being billed for that unit, whether we want to pull it out of their finances or not, but it would certainly be an incentive to get them done on time. I would think this is pretty critical.
Absolutely.
Well, and the county may not have to pay for that at all. That could be completely, you know, a charge that's levied against the component unit. But
Right.
did we say that the ones that were not audited by Larson were special service and a couple of, well, they're all special service, I guess. Special service water, special service, the transportation. Was there one other?
Someone mentioned recreation.
I hate to say, I mean,
Okay.
Right, just here.
I guess what I'm saying is they're relatively small. Maybe Larson could, you know, offer some really attractive pricing because from their perspective, waiting on the other auditor is a hassle and time consuming, and it makes their report late. So they may very well welcome the opportunity to do these smaller audits quickly and move on to the counties.
Okay. Anything else to discuss?
Well, I think we need to discuss the 60-day warning and that we need to discuss the hold on their funds for sure. I don't have a desire to make this political, but it is certainly leaning toward political when I have to hear from the local media that there's holds on our funds. I don't want to hear from the local media first. I have emails finally here that show that Seth Oveson emailed Jock Hadler about this 2 months ago to date almost. And as a commission, we've been over a lot of this before. There's no reason, and I'm looking all the way around the room. I know that Kevin was aware of this. Quinn was probably aware of it. Gabe, you had to be aware of it.
I was aware of it starting about a week ago.
For a commissioner to be left out of this is becoming a real habit and an issue for me here. And so I would like to go through this. I'd like to know when those funds are going to be released because the local media, what was their verbiage? Soon. What does soon mean to the rest of you? Because this is a pretty critical issue. And I know that we've had discussions about this in the past and we've had these back and forth arguments. I would say that there has not been a single audit committee meeting that this hasn't been an issue for me. And we can even go and find out more on social media and I can see where they're blaming me for this hold on these funds. And I see your initials there where you're liking those things, Kevin. So if you don't want it to be political, you should stay out of the political arena too. Otherwise, what's going on with our funds? I would like a complete update from you as to what is going to happen to our funds here, because as we probably all saw the KSL news story, there was a solid number that Mr. Dougal mentioned in that news story. I have never heard of a dollar amount to date. And I actually sent an email to him asking that very question a while back. And I don't know what is the date of the funds that we have to transfer in order to get our tax revenue stream released. And I think there's got to be some answers here from somebody regarding this, and then some future. You can't leave the commission body in the dark. And I'm guessing Trish knew about it, but I'm not sure that there was a hold on our funds. You had no idea?
Well, I mean, it's all KSR. No.
That's when you heard about it as well?
Yeah, and I don't put a lot of credence in KSL personally.
Well,
But
but
I
it was,
I mean, I
it
saw
was
it,
the
yes.
auditor
No, that's-
speaking, and I put a lot of credence in him, as we all
Right,
know.
no, I understand.
And so I'm just saying that we've got to come up with something here.
So I can, first, I was first aware of this issue roughly a week ago, and maybe less. I don't know. I mean, it was shortly before that meeting in the state. So I do think that part of the reason, Jacques not here, but I think that letter was addressed to him only, and it came when he was in Africa for a month. So I think that might have something to do with people like me not caring about the letter issue. I guess I was a little confused about. I mean, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole letter is mainly about our main financial statement being late. And in that main financial statement, once it gets done, and if it were on time, that would allow us to also say that we have made a transfer associated with the 63, 67 issue. That's what's being referred to specifically in there. So if we didn't have the component unit problem, the TRT issues would have not come up this way.
But that doesn't stand up to what Mr. Dougal said on television. I have a hard time believing that when he said there's over $5 million, I don't remember the exact number he used, that needs to be transferred. There has to be a plan going on here somewhere. In fact, that this letter of July 19th to now, there hasn't been a discussion around this, tends me to leave me with the understanding that this is a political issue. And I don't want it to be political. I want it to be resolved. We're basically talking about a government shutdown here. If it's all of our tax money, and Stephen, please weigh in. I mean, what do we have to do to release that hold?
So from the original letter, and I'll note that the things that I, once my office got it, I got it last week. Chrissy and I instantly reached out. We tried to get as much information as we can. I was up at the training up in Salt Lake, as you guys know, in Logan, sorry. And one of the things in the 60-day notice, it does reference, and it could have been clearer, but it does reference that it has recommendations, that it makes, states that they're late. It says, in addition, the office provided the county a management letter dated June 21st, which reported findings related to the improper use and reporting of the TRT funds. And the office's letter contained recommendations about rebalancing the fund balances to reflect the statutory required allocation provisions. But then it says, if the county does not implement the office's recommendations, with plural, the office will act under a certain provision. I read the hold notice. So the hold notice itself is different than this. It says at the bottom language of the 60-day notice, it says that it will withhold from Grand County state allocated funds or property taxes. And then the hold notice itself says all property tax distributions. I would have liked to get this earlier so we could have sought some clarifications, because there are some portions of it that are ambiguous. There are some portions of it that could have been worded more effectively. But it was obviously the intent of the original notice. The letter was to encourage us to get into compliance as quickly as possible and comply with the recommendations. Then the hold notice refers to the late reporting, and then it notes that we have to comply with all laws, but then it also adds in a provision about correcting the 64, 67 split that we've agreed to correct. I think on these, they could have done better to specify, but my office could have received it earlier, and that's one of the heartaches, or headaches, heartaches, stomach aches that my office has, is when we don't get these things, I can't give the commission the heads up about acting, because when Chrissy got it, she about panicked, because she said, what do? We need to hurry up and do something. And that's where my office has a bit of concern when we don't get things like this. And I know Jacques was out of town. My hope is that we can learn from this and include my office on things like this, because if I don't get brought in, then I can't give full advice to the full commission. And I think it would be helpful, because all the commissioners here noted that they didn't get it until recently, and that's something that we really need to work on.
Still, I please correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the reading of the letter, the first thing they're asking for, first paragraph, is to get our financials.
Correct.
And then they say, and then we also want this documentation, they mention percentages, and I think my understanding from talking with people like Quinn, who were closer to this, is that probably means the 63, 67 issue. But that's something, and this is my understanding from talking to Gabe last week, in order for us to document efficiently, the commission said months ago, fix that 63, 67 allocation issues, $600,000, whatever. But we can't do it until our financials are complete. And so I think the ways in which this was getting delayed behind the times didn't have a lot to do with the county's actions. That had a lot to do with waiting for these components. So that's where this particular, we can talk about, you've also brought up the bigger issue and all the other things there. My read of the letter is that that's not what they're referring to.
But let's just base it off of the conversation between that reporter and John Dougal. Has anybody reached out for clarification? I mean, Gabe, where are we going with this? Don't we want to ask him what exactly is it that's going to take to get this released? Or are we just going to hope that filing the financial statements, that poof, this is going to go away? I mean, I hate to put you on the hot seat here, but number one, I've been left out of the conversation, which I don't think is appropriate. And number two, I'd like to have some answers out of the state auditor. I don't want a whole bunch of, even Stephen can't give a definite answer because he's kind of in the same position I am. Somebody should be reaching out to Mr. Dougal, is my personal opinion.
Well, the statements that Mr. Dougal has made have come out relatively recently, and I don't think it's unfair to looking at the form of the letter of the notice. Up until now, I don't think it's unfair, to sort of accept that correction of the mistaken allocation split, along with other agreed upon corrections by the commission up to this point, were enough to cure what was being asked of the notice. I would say, what has recently come to the fore seems to me like a much different story than what is presented in the notice, and that's I think what is causing some confusion at this point, and I don't disagree with you that further clarification is warranted.
Well, I know everybody thinks I have the auditor's personal ear, but I haven't got a response to my email either. What is the dollar amount? And I would think that somebody in the position here, yourself, Mr. Kaufman, there's got to be somebody that can get a report back from that state auditor as to what it's going to take. Maybe I'm thinking that this is far more serious than everybody else is, but I believe a tax hold is pretty serious.
There's a dollar amount associated with correcting the mistaken split, and also there was a acknowledged error in allocating TRCC funds to the transit program, and there's a transfer of funds from the general fund to Fund 16, roughly in the amount of. I'm sorry, I said TRCC before. I meant to say Rec Film Conventions of TRT. But I've directed the auditors per the commission to make that correction in the amount of, I believe it's in total of $700,000. And so that's my role here, is to make that direction per the agreement of the commission. It's not my job to, get on my own horse and start, directing our auditors to make, arrange our books in a way as associated with one office's recommendation for another. It's just not my job. And so, up to now, my understanding, which I think is a fair read of the letter, was that, a correction of the mistaken allocation of 63 to 37 versus 67 to 33. I'm sorry if I'm getting those numbers wrong, but that mistaken split, that I take responsibility for an error, and there's no question, there's no interpretive matter there. That's just a correction that's agreed upon. But as I guess that's where I would that's kind of what I would say at this point. So, I feel it's defensible. to this point.
On the subject of coming up with a dollar amount, I was interested to read in, I guess, the local article about this, that the auditor seemed to be saying things in the press about flexibility and if you will, if there's evidence of this. So they seem to be giving out, they were not giving out signals with like, there's this dollar amount, we need to see it. My read from the letter and also from the statements in the paper is, there's certain things that we've all agreed to that they want certified to make sure it's actually happening. And the doors are still open about talking about other aspects of the audit. That's how it came across the paper. I agree with you. We should be in touch and try to get this, and I'm hoping that can happen.
Well, I mean, so who do we ask to do that? Is that the chair, the commission's responsibility? Do we want to ask Gabe to do it? And Gabe, I'm not pointing fingers at you. I just know that there's a political issue that's been ongoing and long-term here, and I'd like to get past it. I'd like to be included in county commission business without having to ask to be included. And that's really what this boils down to, because I put far more emphasis on that whole letter than you guys do. I can totally read it the way you do, Gabe. But I put far more into it. And then when you have to hear somebody give out a $5 million number, when they give that out, the state auditor was interviewed. To me, that's pretty serious. And I think that somebody ought to be reaching out to find out what exactly it is that's going to be required to make sure that everybody's staff included gets a paycheck eventually.
I want to clarify, Bill, I did not see this until last week as well myself. This was.
I didn't either.
And this isn't a blame game.
No, I know.
This
I just
isn't
wanted to
blame
clear that up because if
But-
there was the
but
impression
it
that I
is.
saw this in July.
It is. We've got to get this cleared up, and it's been going on for far too long. In my
I think one of the other hard things is if we don't have these things timely, now we respond after the notice to say, what did you want from us before the notice has already lapsed? And it just takes away the county's best position to say, hey, we want to comply. And it makes it really hard to show that we want to document, demonstrate compliance if we only ask for clarification after the notice has lapsed. And I think that's one of the things that I know there's a lot that's going on, but legal notices, they need to make their way to the attorney's office, because if they don't, then I can't advise the commission on the seriousness, because it's never been something that we've ever thought was a possibility, because all the meetings we went to, they seemed like they were going to give Grant County time. Like in the TCAP meeting, they were sat over and said, we're not going to do anything. We're going to be patient and wait, and we're going to come back and give an audit. But now all of a sudden we get a hole on the.
Well, but I think the reason this issue is confused, at least what I believe to be true based on conversations with our experts here, is that this hold is mainly about the financial statements. Just that's if Transportation Special Service District had gotten their stuff in on time, wouldn't be having any of these conversations. It would still be on that slow time. And then they did want, as part, in that letter, they tacked on the second paragraph. It said they also want to see documentation of percentages, which we could have done months ago. That is not a disputed thing. The county has been eager to correct that error. And just the way things worked out, we don't get to officially correct it until our financials are done, and then that got delayed. So I just don't think this hold is mostly to do with component units and very little to do with TRT audit. I mean, there is a connection, but it's not much of one, I think.
How hard would it be to clarify that?
I agree with you. So
That's what I'm trying to make is let's clarify that and move on. I mean, this is.
So who's the best person to do that? To ask for that clarification? Would it be Stephen? I don't know.
I would be happy to do it, but
Okay.
I honestly think it should come from the legal department. This is a legal document that we've got going here, or at least the two of you in conjunction.
Chrissy's already started drafting the
Okay.
letter.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
can you keep me in the loop on that?
Of course, yep. I'll keep all three of you on the,
Thank
I'll circle everybody that's here. I'll put on an
Okay,
email
thank
chain, and then people can join in and correct, and because there's things in this area that there are people more knowledgeable than me about it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the rest of the agenda. Is there anything new to say about that we haven't already talked about the external audit? Okay.
Well, as far as like complying with the requested certifications and reports. It's highest priority right now. I've been in contact with Larson today. There's some back and forth in terms of tying down the trial balances and getting their final financial statement draft. Of course, I want to do a review of that. That's careful and thorough. It's not something I want to just say, oh yeah, here they are. Okay, good, let's go. Like I need to sit down. I need to print them out and sit down with them and spend several hours reviewing them. And their managing partners also have such a review. But my hope right now is, I think with a reasonable hope that within 48 to 72 hours, that aspect, which includes the sort of stated corrections for the mistaken allocation, will be sent through. But I think that this, also including this sort of clarification with that, I think is appropriate.
Good, thanks. And then our final remaining agenda topic is contract for external audit. And just to give background for newcomers here, I think we've been with Larson for around 5 years now, and this the conversations have, maybe it's good practice to change. Only 3 years? Oh, sorry, I apologize. Okay, but at some point we might want to put it out for bid again. And the question is now the time? Do we want to wait a little bit longer? I think that's why, actually, this was your agenda item, Bill. I should have let you introduce it, sorry.
So if we could back up just a little bit to the Larson's engagement letter. I'm curious, is that just an engagement for this year? Which would actually be what, for the 2023 financial statements, or?
That's my understanding.
That's where that ends, is after they've done that. Because for me, just to have that clarified, and maybe Karen can weigh in, I just want to make sure that that they're not already contracted to 2024 when we start making decisions about this point that Kevin just brought up. So this is specifically for our 2023 financial statements.
Yes.
So I definitely, my personal feelings, and we can vote or however we want to look at this, but I would like to see us look to put this out so that we do refresh that. And I mean, it was made very evident in several meetings up at UAC and different things. And I know they were more in your department, but I went to some of those meetings that the turnover is good for the county. It's not bad for it to turn this over and let other companies come in here and do our audits so that we don't get complacent and we don't lose track of what the importance is here. And it's not just a rubber stamp, and I'm not saying that's what Larson has done, but it prevents some of that. And so I'm all about looking at putting this out to bid for the internal and the external audits for future contracts. I think that we're both getting into their 5-year term here to where it would be time to look elsewhere.
Yeah, and I've got a draft that I think is pretty close with regards to the request for proposals. I think some language could be added that would, based on our discussion today regarding including component units. And I was speaking with Matt Geddes from Squire, our consulting accountants, and I asked him about timing. Is this are we still within a reasonable window to put this out to bid for an audit for next year of this year's books? And he confirmed that it was, and that I believe Salt Lake County just put theirs out, and that theirs is obviously it's really massive. So it seemed, but I don't think that they're, I'd like to get that out.
And so do we, speaking of Squires, do we have them on a revolving similar type of thing where their contract is relooked at? Because I would think that at every aspect here that we want to be covering our bases.
Yeah, that's year to year. So we could choose to discontinue working with them.
Well,
So having
I don't
that,
necessarily like that verbiage as much as I do just looking that we're trying to cycle
So-
this, but I don't want it to be seen as I'm trying to come in here and hatchet somebody, but there is a reason for those recommendations to turn over and to move it into new hands occasionally.
I could offer just a brief opinion.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of value in switching the external auditor every few years, whether it's 3 or 5. We stayed with our former audit firm for many, many years, which was probably a misstep. And I think looking back on that, I can say that it was. I think it was. My personal opinion is that it was. I think that our consulting accountants, if I'll leave this up to Gabe, we're satisfied with the product, there's value in having them stay on a longer term. Because they're the ones that are familiar with our books, and we want the ones scrutinizing our books to change, so that the scrutiny changes. But so that we have a trusted partner, if that trust exists, if we're satisfied with their product, that trust extends through a longer time frame than the external audit, which I think there is value in seeing that. That's kind of my personal take on it.
And I would agree with that. If Gabe agrees with it, clearly it's his relationship, and that's the important one there. That yes.
And my hope with the consulting accountants and Matt Geddes from Squire has told me this flat out is he doesn't want to have a forever. His ideal would be to not have a forever relationship with us, especially now that Stephen Bowles is on board. I think the ideal scenario, especially coming into this next year, would be to use the opportunity to build expertise in house. To be able to prepare our books for the audit and make necessary corrections and entries in anticipation of the audit, such that we don't need to hire that outside consulting firm. And I would say also Squire might be a very viable candidate, to receive a proposal from. And so, and obviously we would be able to retain them in both of those capacities. So, that's just a thought that I had. Also, I generally agree that keeping the external auditor is fresh that strikes me as very reasonable and very smart. The GFOA actually has put out literature that actually it agrees with that, but it also is very clear in making the point that local governments should choose the relationship with external auditors that is in the best interest of the county, and that sort of moves forward in a way that is efficient and is beneficial. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is they put out literature that it doesn't actually, there's not a hard fast 3 or 5 years that you should switch external auditors. In fact, they make the suggestion that you could have one for 15 years and it could be actually a really good thing. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to hedge or suggest that we would retain Larson in perpetuity. It's not at all what I'm saying. Let me be very clear. But I just want to sort of, provide what has actually been released by the GFOA. That's the Government Finance Officers Association about that kind of concept. But I prefer to keep it fresh. And I think, I look forward to working with the auditors. It's always a chance for us to improve, and fresh eyes is to that end is I think is helps us in that respect.
Karen, do you have anything to say about that?
I do. So what we typically see in the markets that I serve are 5-year turnarounds on audit firms. I guess what I'm gleaning from the conversation is that the county is late because the component units are late, and the component units are late because their auditors are late. And it seems to me that the county is starting to gain some ground by getting some consistency with the auditor. In fact, you're considering having the same auditor, and you've already got Larson doing, I don't know, 4 or 5 of the component units. So if you were to switch it up next year and find a new auditor, you could potentially be changing the auditor of all the component units and the county. And I think that might have some repercussions in delaying the whole process again. I understand the idea about wanting to have a fresh look, and I agree with that. I think that 3 years is not a long time to have an auditor. This is the 3rd year, and then there could potentially be 4 or 5. But in my perspective, being an auditor, I know it, having done that, I know it takes a while to get familiar with a new entity. And so if you're asking, a firm to get familiar with your new entity plus 6 component units and get it all done timely, that might be a big ask on the part of the audit firm and the staff. So I don't have a dog in the hunt, but I would think with as many hurdles as I'm hearing the county has, changing the auditor at this point, I don't know that it benefits you as much as it potentially hurts you.
Thanks.
Hopefully there's a lot of good, when it gets put out, hopefully there's a lot of great proposals that we receive and it can be a conversation, you know.
But it's okay, but you are gonna put out an RFP? Is that, it seems like part of the conversation, we're asking whether we should do it, but it sounds like you're already on that path.
I would have to look at the existing contract to see what the terms for renewal are, but I was, yeah, I would have to do some research to see if we might even be obligated to at this point.
Okay, so we'll revisit this at the next meeting then after.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I certainly put value in what you're saying, Karen. But I also see we've had quite a history here of problems in our past financial statements. And I would be in favor of looking to make some changes to try and bring in some fresh eyes. I'm not saying that those problems are Larson's. I'm just saying those problems exist and that we need to look at trying to have a little different outcome in the future.
Okay, well, I think we're at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else?
I would like to thank Karen for being here. I mean, for myself personally, Karen, it's nice having somebody with some expertise and another set of eyes to look over what we're doing.
Thank you.
How to run a construction company and keep my books in the black, but I do not have the expertise that goes as deep as we need sometimes, and I'm thankful that you're on board to help us with that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks.
Happy to help.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then I will adjourn this meeting of the audit committee.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming in, Dave.